What's up, guys? I'm Chris Spags here, back with another Four Corners video for today's 13-game MLB slate, courtesy of Osmo.com. It seemed like the format yesterday helped some people out and also helped us surface some really high-quality, lower-owned picks. So like this video right now, let's keep the momentum going. And of course, as always, comment your favorite one-off hitter down below. I like hearing what you guys are thinking about, what directions you're trying to go with your lineups today. So like the video right now and leave that comment down below. The first corner I would have hit on today are the top pitchers on the slate based on the ownership we're seeing so far. And one guy jumps out as number one by a wide margin here, Zach Wheeler. He projects for 43% ownership on DraftKings, 31% on FanDuel, and 38% on Yahoo. He's got 4 implied runs against him, and he's not missing bats so far in 2019 with an 8.9% swinging strike rate. He's at a decent price, and he's due for some positive regression, but it feels a bit shaky to me. Philly has a .349 on-base percentage versus right-hand pitching so far. They're also around league average with a 22.7% K rate. So I don't know that this is a perfect matchup versus Philly, and Zach Wheeler, a good pitcher, but a guy whose stuff hasn't been there so far to start the year. So I'm willing to go under the field on him because the prospects here don't seem as great as a guy like Chris Sale yesterday, who we talked about, who looked like he was in a good spot before rain derailed him. I'd rather go to a guy like that and hope for positive regression than a guy like Zach Wheeler, who's in a spot versus a Phillies team that's really not as bad as it may seem. Nick Margevicius should also be pretty highly owned today, over 20%, especially on sites who have to roster 2 pitchers. He has a 3.7 implied run total versus Seattle, and a projected righty-heavy lineup would be good for Nick with a .77 whip and 10.1 Ks per 9 versus right-hander so far in a limited sample size. There is some risk here with Seattle mashing left-handed pitching so far in 2019. You have a 387 on-base percentage, a 328 ISO, and 289 batting average. And those are all top numbers on the slate, but they do seem like they should come down to earth a bit. So I don't mind going to Margevicius. Again, the Vegas total is what I'm really looking at here, and I think it's a decent spot here to get him on track, and also for the hope that the Mariners are going to come back down to earth with their numbers just being completely unsustainable so far this year. Frankie Montas versus Texas should also have a good bit of ownership as well. We just saw yesterday what Chris Bassett did with a solid day and comparably mediocre stuff. The 3.6 implied runs for Montas and a 25.4% K rate for Texas versus right-hand pitching should make it a more palatable spot. Montas not the best player, but doing a little bit better this year as well, so I don't mind going to Montas in the hopes that his stuff is just good enough to get past the Texas team. It's really not that great away from home so far. The next corner I want to hit on are the top stacks on today's slate, and the first team I want to talk about are the Astros going against Michael Pineda. They're implied for 5.2 runs, and the stack's going to be under 10% owned, so it's a nice spot to go to Houston. Pineda is allowing a lot of home runs this year with a 5.3% home run rate, but he also has been missing bats reasonably well with an 11.3% swinging strike rate and a 33.1% chase rate. He may be due for some positive regressions, but again, I'm trying to play these Vegas totals as they are. It is saying the Astros are going to get going here in this spot, so I'm willing to trust that and trust an Astros stack who generally always looks good, especially when they're going to be not a particularly chalky option. A national stack versus Jeff Hoffman looks pretty good as well with 5.3 implied runs in their favor. It's going to be the highest on the slate. Hoffman's been egregiously bad versus lefties so far with a 3.82 whip and 24.6, as you can tell by the exclamation points, hits per 9, a very big number, but it's a very limited sample size, so you could say Hoffman won't be that bad forever, but he's not missing bats with an 8.3% swinging strike rate, and being at Coors is an opportunity for lefties like Juan Soto and Adam Eaton to take him out. The rest of the lineup as well looks good. Hoffman, to me, just a guy who doesn't grade out that well. He could get a little bit better here, but still probably not going to be a good pitcher. And a spot for him not missing bats at Coors can be a lot of danger, as well as a lot of opportunity for a national stack. A Red Sox stack versus Spencer Turnbull looks pretty good, with the Red Sox implied for 5.2 runs here versus Turnbull, and that's despite the fact Turnbull's been pretty good this year so far with a 1.29 whip and 10.3 Ks per 9. Turnbull's noticeably weaker versus lefties with a 1.5 whip compared to a 1.02 whip versus righties, so that means it's a boost for Andrew Benintendi and Mitch Moreland, but really the whole 2 through 6 in the order all look good with over a 200 ISO versus right-hand pitching. Even Zue Lin down in the 9 hole has a 361 on-base percentage and a 204 ISO versus right-hand pitching, so you could stack this lineup a bunch of different ways. A lot of lineup flexibility here with the Red Sox, and they're going to be lower owned than they normally would be, so it's a good spot here versus the Red Sox, a team who really is due for some positive regression overall versus right-hand pitching. The next corner I want to hit on are some of the lower owned options on the slate, and the White Sox stack going against Andrew Cashner fits that criteria. They have 5.2 implied runs, and Cashner is one of the worst pitchers on the slate with a 5.5 xFIP and a 7.2% swinging strike rate so far in 2019. The stack hit well yesterday, and they remain decently low owned despite reasonable prices, still a little bit higher than you'd want the White Sox to be, but the results have been there, so I don't mind going to the White Sox today with a really nice spot here versus Andrew Cashner. Homer Bailey going against the Rays has 4.7 implied runs from Vegas, which is not great, but he's been a stellar pitcher so far in 2019 with 3.47 xFIP, 10.6 Ks per 9, and 11.5% swinging strike rate so far. Again, the implied total here is not great, but the Rays do strike out at above league average with a 24% rate versus right-hand pitching, and only Joey Wendell and Yandy Diaz are noticeably better than league average, so could be a good spot here versus Homer Bailey, who's looked like a rejuvenated pitcher. I don't mind going to him today, even though that run total does scare me a little bit. Trevor Williams going against the Diamondbacks gets 3.9 implied runs in his favor, and he's a comparable pitcher to Joe Musgrove, who people had a lot of yesterday, and he performed decently well despite some poorly timed home runs, so not a perfect game for Musgrove, but a good situation for him overall, which he could have done better in. Williams has a 37.7% chase rate so far in 2019, and that's actually the highest on the slate. He's going against an Arizona team who has a 24.1% K rate versus right-hand pitching. I'll likely have some Williams exposure, and I'll also probably have some Diamondbacks exposure just to hedge, because I think there is a spot Williams can have a decent day here, and the run total does seemingly support that, but the Diamondbacks have enough power here to cause some problems for him. And this is maybe a little bit of a hot take, but I do like the Rocky stat going against Patrick Corbin. They get 4.8 implied runs in their favor, which is not great at Coors, but Corbin can get shelled if his strikeout stuff isn't there. I think Nolan Arenado is rounding into form recently, and the big day yesterday he had, and he and Trevor Story have also had some monster splits versus left-hand pitching, both guys over 315 ISOs. I'll talk more about Arenado in a second, but overall, this Rocky stack does interest me a little bit, depending on how the lineup looks once it comes out. The last corner I want to hit on is my favorite one-offs for the day, and a guy I just talked about as tops on the list for me. Nolan Arenado looks particularly good here versus Patrick Corbin. He's got a 364 batting average and a 389 ISO versus left-hand pitching going back to last year. Arenado also only has a 14.9% K rate versus left-hand pitching, so there's hope he can hang in there until Corbin makes a mistake, and Corbin is known to do that from time to time. I think Corbin's a good pitcher. I don't mind going to some exposure to him, but I do think Arenado's going to get to him, or Story, but I would slightly favor Arenado at a little bit less ownership. Mitch Moreland versus Spencer Turnbull would also be a one-off I like quite a bit. He's had a ton of pop with a 241 ISO versus right-hand pitching going back to last year, and as I mentioned, Turnbull is worse versus lefties, allowing 10.5 hits per 9 to that group. So overall, I think it's a good spot here versus Moreland. He's one of my favorite Red Sox out of that stack going against Turnbull. Anthony Rendon is going against Jeff Hoffman, and he did rest yesterday, but he's a steady hitter with a ton of power who makes great contact. Only a 13% K rate, and that bodes well in Coors. Again, Rendon is a good hitter. I don't think Hoffman's a good pitcher, so I like going to Rendon today, coming fresh into the spot here in Coors. And Matt Carpenter going against Zach Davies interests me as well. He's hitting leadoff, and Davies is appreciably worse versus lefties with a 1.6 whip compared to a 1.1 whip versus righties. Again, Carpenter's at a reasonable price, and he is hitting leadoff, and he does have a 268 ISO versus right-hand pitching going back to last year. Carpenter's starting the year a little slow, but he's due for some positive regression. I think the spot versus Davies is one that he can get his numbers back up to where they should be. So I like Carpenter quite a bit here as a reasonably priced one-off in a leadoff spot. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on today's slate. So right now, help me out. Like this video. Leave a comment down below with your favorite one-off pitcher. Really appreciate the support you guys gave as we try this new format here to make it a little bit easier to build MLB lineups with this Four Corners video. So help me out. Let's keep the momentum going. Like the video right now and leave a comment down below. And check the promo code SWITCH and HEDGE. That'll give you half off your first month of any package at Osmo.com. And MLB one and all sport one, it doesn't matter. Anyone with Fantasy Cruncher as well, that's all at your fingertips. There's going to be some exciting new stuff coming with Fantasy Cruncher soon. The announcement of Fantasy Cruncher Pro, which is going to have some deep integrations with everything we do at Osmo, is coming out soon. So use that promo code SWITCH and HEDGE. Get in there for half off your first month on any package. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Four Corners video. So good luck.